Oh, hi everyone. How are you doing? So, here are 25 mage talents which will make you a better mage, and I can pretty much guarantee there'll be a few of these which you don't already know. So, let's start with number 1, which is running and drinking. So, a lot of the time, if you don't have a lot of time to drink, you can actually just click continuously on your mana. This only really works with your mana drink, and this will very quickly regenerate your mana without the need to sit down. So this I actually found incredibly useful, but the only downside is you need a lot of mana to do this. I typically get about 120, and that should do me maybe for a little while. So number 2 is try to drink after every battle. It's sometimes beneficial to get to the start of the next battle before you sit down and drink. Number 3 is you should always use a mana gem where possible. In longer fights, mana gems come in incredibly useful, and they are literally a lifesaver sometimes, especially if you're going to use a lot of mana in that fight. Number 4 is it is actually possible to use Polymorph to interrupt enemies. So let's say there's a really powerful caster which can be polymorphed. You can actually continuously polymorph it, interrupting any spell that it's casting, and it doesn't matter if the polymorph gets interrupted, you're still kind of interrupting the enemy, so that can be useful in certain situations. Next is macro instant cast spells to your damage buttons. So I have quite a lot of abilities as a mage, and I actually macro most of them to my Arcane Blast, which I use a lot as an Arcane Mage. And this kind of means that I don't have to do quite so much micromanaging, and I can literally just press one button and just destroy enemies. So let's move on to number 6, which is always use the correct armour. For example, Molten Armour is really good if you're a Fire Mage. Mage Armour is really good if you are an Arcane Mage, etc. Generally speaking, you will benefit a lot more using the correct armour type than any other armour type, but there might be certain situations where this isn't correct. Generally speaking, if you are a fresh level 70, Fire is the best way to go. Arcane is really good later on, and Frost is really good for PvP, probably the best. Wow, we're already on number 8, which is there are 2 talents which you can use, which are very useful. So one is in the Arcane Tree, which is Spell Power, which increases critical strike damage bonus of all spells by 50%. And you can also use Ice Shards, which increases the critical strike damage of any frost spells by 100%. The result is a pretty nice Frostbolt crit, which, when it goes off, can do a lot of damage. As I'll try to demonstrate now. Obviously, you can use your Ice Lance when the target is frozen to do bonus damage. There we go, 3000 damage, which is not too bad, I think. Okay, let's move on. So, number 10 is if you are an Arcane Mage, which I currently am, Spirit is actually better than Mana per 5. So I would prioritize getting Spirit over Mana per 5. Generally speaking, Mana per 5 is quite okay if you are, for example, a Fire or a Frost Mage, because that will be sort of a continuous regeneration. Next, you should always plan your mana for the fight that you're going to be doing. So, for example, if you are an Arcane Mage like me, or even a Frost Mage, you may want to slow down and maybe use a few spells which are more efficient on mana to kind of keep a bit for the whole fight. This kind of means that you're a bit more useful and you can basically have a bit more utility later in the fight. I just got an Ancient Lichen, that's really good. there's an add-on called Pawn, which I recommend you use. PAWN. This basically allows you to compare any two items. So for example, well, trinkets are a bad example. But if I want to compare my rings, for example, I can put them both into Pawn and it will tell me the relative power of each of these items. Both of these items are pretty bad. I mean, my mage is not my main character. But anyway, this is a really cool add-on. The coolest thing is it can very quickly give you a percentage score, so you know if a piece of armour is good for fire or frost or arcane. So yeah, use that add-on. We're at number 12, which is Spellsteal. Now, Spellsteal is amazing in PvP. You can steal Power Word Shield from a paladin, which will give you a bonus shield and also steal it away from a paladin. You can also steal stuff from disc priests, which is very, very powerful. So I would recommend you use your Spellsteal, which you get at level 70, I think. Generally, Arcane is weak in PvP. Fire is kind of okay, but it's not great. The strongest spec in PvP is probably Frost, because you can manipulate the enemy more easily. If you're a Fire Mage, you should use Molten Fury, because this increases your damage by 20% when the enemy is below 20% health. So this is a really cool talent to use if you are fire. You can also use your cooldowns like Combustion and Icy Veins to increase your damage as well when the enemy is below 20%. So go crazy with this. Just make sure you don't pull threat, obviously. Arcane Blast can do a lot of damage if you are arcane or really well geared. But the problem is it can consume a lot of mana. So one of the tips I would say is if you get to 3 stacks, you can basically throw 3 or 4 frost bolts at the enemy, and this will kind of reset your arcane blast counter. Now, this will lower your damage a little bit, but the cool thing is this means that you will last a lot longer in fights, especially big battles like a Gruul and Maggie. Mana pots can be really expensive, so there are actually cheaper alternatives available. So for example, a bottled Never Gone energy can be used in Tempest Keep. This is really, really useful and is generally much cheaper than the alternatives. Shadow Priests and Shamans can give you a massive bonus to your mana regeneration if they're in a group with you, and even Druids could possibly give you an Innovate, but Innovate's usually reserved for other classes, but this is a possibility, potentially, if you do a lot of damage. So, if you are a tailor, then there are some very nice but very expensive things that you can create. For example, the 3-piece Spellfire set increases your spell damage by 7% of your intellect if you have all 3 pieces. This is obviously very nice. There's also a 2-piece Spell Strike set, which gives your spells a 5% chance to increase your spell damage by 92 for 10 seconds. But the materials for all of this are really quite expensive. Still worth getting if you're a tailor. So, stay as far away from mobs as possible in PvE. If you are closer to the mobs, you're more likely to pull threat. The other thing is, you can get add-ons. For example, there's an add-on called Range Display, which tracks your ranges, which can be very, very useful. There's also an add-on you can use called Decursive, which can be useful if you want to remove curses from the enemy. Or from your allies, rather. So, Frost Mages can actually macro their abilities, or rather their summoned person. You can actually macro their ability by saying using a macro which reads click at action button 5. Now the advantage is you can freeze a target using your what are they called? Oh my god. So yeah, using your water elemental, you can freeze a target using this macro, and then you can use your ice lance, which obviously does bonus damage to frozen targets. You can also use your frost nova to freeze a target as well, but I'm sure you guys already know that. And the last tip I want to give you guys is just have fun with your mage. Mages are a really fun class, and there's a lot to explore. The 3 different specs are very different, and I've really enjoyed going through all 3 of these specs, just basically experimenting and seeing what works for me. I've kind of got the standard Arcane build at the moment, which looks a bit like this. And then Frost, all the way down to Cold Snap. But yeah, they're an awesome class to play, and I really hope you found this useful. And let me know what you think, and I will see you guys soon.